Edward Street is the setting for our lockdown video today, and the dominating building, of course, which is not on Edward Street but overlooks Edward Street, is the Church of St. John the Baptist, commonly known as St. John's Church. My friend Frank used to tell a story about a priest who was a resident here back in the 50s and 60s, Father McCarthy. Father McCarthy was what we'd call a long-winded sermonizer. One morning during Mass, Father McCarthy was giving his sermon when one of the congregation stood up, and Father McCarthy shouted from the pulpit, "My good man," he said, "where are you going?" And the man turned back and he said, "I'm going for a haircut, Father." And the priest said, "Why didn't you think of that before you came in?" "Before I came in, Father, I didn't need a haircut." The building on the corner was Lyons and Brown's. It has been closed for many years, and the life story of Tom Crean is depicted on the windows now. But in days gone by, after Mass on Sunday, workmen would gather here and line up waiting for the farmers to come out of church to hire them for the following week's work. If you didn't get work, you went home to your family empty-handed. This was where Deirdre Flynn's pub was. Deirdre Flynn is still hale and hearty, however the pub is closed for many years. A very popular venue in the 50s. And I might say Deirdre Flynn was a very popular publican. I am standing now across the road from the General Post Office in Tralee, which was opened in the first decade of the 20th century, when the telephone exchange moved from where the Grand Hotel is in Denny Street in Tralee to this new premises here. At that time, when the telephone exchange was in the Grand Hotel on Denny Street, the total exchange was the size of an upright piano. Now the telephone exchange in Tralee occupies 4 or 5 acres of warehouse. The building we're looking at now is presently owned by the Department of Social Welfare and houses the welfare officers. But this building was once the Christian Brothers Boys School, primary school, where education and corporal punishment was dealt out in equal measure. It was here we spent our youth. I'm searching my mind to say something good about the place, but the only thing good about it I can say is that we escaped in the evening to fun and laughter in our lives. My own father, going back to the early 20s, was expelled from this school. The reason being that in preparation for confirmation class, the bishop came from Killarney to address the confirmation class and examine them on their religious knowledge. And during a melee and in the schoolyard, there was a straw. A straw is a clump of grass, and there was a straw thrown and it knocked the bishop's mitre off his head. And as a result, there were several boys expelled from school, my father being amongst them. At that time, you couldn't leave school unless you received your confirmation, and confirmation was one of the many sacraments bestowed by the Catholic Church, and it was probably the time you got it was the time you were entering manhood, and you couldn't, it would have been unthinkable to leave school without having your confirmation. So in an attempt to address the wrong he had committed, my father cycled to Killarney and apologised to the bishop. However, the bishop was unable to get him back into school, but told him if he got into any other school in the diocese of Kerry that he would confirm him when the day came about. As a result of that, my father went to school in a hostel in Castle Gregory, where he made many friends who he had till the day he died. We are standing across the street now from where once stood the Benner's Garage, the local Ford motor agent, and still is, and the Benner's Garage is still in the Benner's family and has moved to the Mile Height, which is about 2 miles east of here on the Killarney Road. Back in the 40s and 50s, my father worked here in Benner's Garage, and part of his duties was that when somebody bought a car, he would teach them the rudiments of driving, how to put the car in gear and how to use the clutch and everything else. And then he would bring them back here where they would pay for the car, and he would face the car in directions of their homes. If they lived in Listowel, he would face the car that way. If they lived in Dingle, he would face the car this way. And his last instruction as they drove off would be to keep the car, keep going, he said, and keep it between the ditches. I'm standing outside the premises of Lidl, the German supermarket giant, and I'm standing on the ground which was previously occupied by McCown's builders merchants. This was their timber yard, coal yard, and further up the street it was their foundry. And as I look down the now newly refurbished or recently refurbished McCown's Lane, I'm reminded of the story that when McCown's Lane was being redeveloped back in the 40s, the tenement buildings were being knocked, and Richard Boyle and Company, who owns Boyle's Hardware and Builders Merchants in Killarney and Tralee, Richard Boyle built houses in Tralee up on the top of Oak Park opposite O'Halloran's shop. The terrace of houses is called Oak Park Domain, and we knew them growing up as being Boyle's homes because of who the builder was, not knowing at that time why they were called Boyle's homes. But the Richard Boyle had a man draw the stone from here by horse and car all the way up to Oak Park to be used in the building of Oak Park Domain. Across the road we have the Edward Court Apartments, which occupy grounds that were owned by McCown's that time as well. Here outside what was Benner's Garage at the time, an incident took place shortly after the truce in around 1922, which I will talk about in a few minutes. Across the road from Benner's Hotel was the Masonic Lodge. The only sign that remains that this was a Masonic Lodge is the Mason sign on the top window, the stained glass on the top window. The sign is still there. When we went to school in Edward Street in Tralee, there was a shortcut through here, through McCown's yard, and along here the area has totally changed, and out into Ash Street, and that is now open and is frequently used by people cutting from Edward Street to Ash Street. And there's a plaque on the wall here, and I'm about now to talk about that incident. There is a plaque here on the wall, commemorating an incident in which Padraig Hannafin was killed when himself and a few of his comrades either attacked a troop of British in an armoured car, or they were trying to steal the armoured car, and he was shot down and fatally wounded. The armoured car was either at or in Benner's garage for servicing, or the troops came to collect it or something. The details of the incident are unclear, but the truce had been signed at the time of this incident, and unknowingly they took part in this event which cost Padraig Hanifin his life. With that, I leave this lockdown video for today.